In the past few years, retro FPS games have come out swinging. Games like Dusk, Ion Fury, and Ultrakill came along and reminded all of us where first-person shooters came from. One game in particular, though, has really made an impression on me. That game is a Medieval. This game was on my Steam wishlist for a long time, probably longer than I'd like to admit, and during the Steam summer sales, I got the notification that a Medieval was on sale. So I forked over the $4.99 and jumped in to see what all that overwhelmingly positive reviews were all about. So grab your battle axe and let's get into my review of a Medieval. Real quick before we get into this, if you like video reviews like this one, please drop a like on the video and subscribe. I plan on doing way more reviews like this one, and it really helps small channels like mine. Okay, let's get back to it. A Medieval describes itself as a retro FPS for the ages. It mixes elements of games like Hexen, Heretic, and Quake, all while managing to feel new at the same time. With fast-paced, responsive combat, absolutely beautiful level design, and a soundtrack that'll blow your balls off, a Medieval is one hell of a ride that just kept me coming back for more. Seriously, I was having so much fun playing this game. Before I knew it, I had played for 3 hours, it was going on 2 AM, and I wasn't even ready to put it down. The story in this game is straightforward and to the point. An ancient evil has appeared and corrupted the sacred lands of the known realms. You play as a character simply called the Champion, and he's the first to overcome the trial of the Black Labyrinth and is now able to carry a special axe that grants him passage to the higher planes. This means he can start stomping mudholes and walking them dry.
Stomp a mudhole in your ass and walk it dry!
Well, that's all I needed to hear. There's some evil, our dude doesn't like evil, let's get rid of said evil. It's a plot as old as FPS games themselves. In Doom, you're on Mars, some scientists open a portal to hell, unleashing a demon invasion, and well, you fuck up some demons. In Quake, you're traveling through slipgates, killing enemies, and saving the Earth, and in a Medieval, you're slaying this ancient evil and saving the Seven Realms. Now, that being said, does a simple plot make a Medieval a boring experience? Well, no. In fact, I think a simple plot like this actually helped this game become so enjoyable. I think the fact that this game doesn't have an overwhelming or complicated story lets other elements of the game, like the level design for instance, have a chance to really shine. That was a great part about these old shooters. The technology for the game engine just wasn't where it is today, and that forced the devs to think of new and creative ways to keep their player engaged other than big set pieces and a Hideo Kojima level plot layered with twists and turns. I'll use this level from Doom 64 for example. Like, look at all these paths you can take, look at the size of this map and all the little secret areas you can get into, it's pretty cool. Now there are some modern FPS games with really good map design, but I feel like the size and the exploration factor of the old school shooter maps hasn't really been duplicated. Now we'll talk about the map design later, let's get back to the story. Now, I'm not saying a Medieval is totally void of any story. There's a quick explanation at the beginning of the game of what's going on, and there's these engravings scattered all over the levels that you can read. I like the way they do this. It gives the levels an extra layer of depth, and I like how it feels like you're unraveling a mystery, like you just stumbled into these worlds after something terrible happened. It makes for an unsettling atmosphere. A Medieval's graphical style is really a thing of beauty. Low poly textures and chunky looking character models manage to nail the retro feel and still look beautiful at the same time. It's weird, my eyes are telling me everything I'm seeing looks old and dated, while my brain is telling me this looks amazing, give me more of this. Every enemy type, every weapon, and every level has a beautiful look and feel to them. I never felt like I was seeing the same thing over and over again as I ran through the levels slaying evil. Every realm has its own enemy type. As you progress through the game, you'll encounter more terrifying and diverse foes to slay. For instance, these guys are called Starlight Defenders, and you encounter them pretty early on. They're a tougher enemy and they hurl these spiky bombs at you, and in large groups that can be pretty dangerous. Or these snake motherfuckers that come at you in large groups and spit acid at you. The different enemy types and gorgeous level design always kept me excited for what I was going to find as the game rolled on. Now, I'm probably going to start showing some late game levels here, so if you don't want any spoilers, you've been warned. I will say that one of my favorite areas is the Solar Solstice. I mean, this level is just gorgeous. The setting sun reflects off of all the gold ornaments and brick, all while these torches are scattered all around, and the flames are dancing all over the wall. It's a great looking level. That's the thing about the levels in a Medieval, they just stick with you. I find that after I'm done playing, I still sometimes just sit there for a little bit and just think about the level design, or maybe I'll run through a level again and just take it slow just to make sure I didn't miss anything. It just goes to show how much time and effort the devs put into these levels. They're fantastic. Now, I can't talk about the graphics without mentioning the RTX update. That's right, this game has ray tracing. When I turned RTX on, it brought a whole new level of atmosphere to the game and made the environments look even more stunning. The lighting, reflections, they all look fantastic, and if you happen to have a graphics card that supports ray tracing, which I know nowadays is almost impossible, definitely give it a go. The sound effects in a Medieval are okay. They're pretty much up to par for a retro FPS. All of the baddies have their own unique sounds that they make, and the protagonist is mostly silent, so there's not much voice acting. You'll hear the occasional grunt when you take damage, or his laugh, I'm assuming it's his laugh, when you pick up a weapon. As far as sound design goes though, the real shining star here is a Medieval soundtrack. I said earlier in the video that it has a soundtrack that will blow your balls off, and that wasn't an exaggeration. Andrew Hulsholt is the composer for this soundtrack, and he's a pretty big name in the FPS community. He's known for games like Dusk, Proteus, and a little indie title you might have heard of called Doom Eternal. Now, while Mick Gordon composed the main Doom game sound, Andrew worked on the Ancient Gods expansion, and honestly, it rips. Hulsholt's work here is just outstanding. I found myself bobbing my head while I was playing like I was at some rock show, and then in other levels, like The Forges for instance, there's just a creepy, ominous track playing. Combine that with a dark and rainy atmosphere, it really does an amazing job of creating this feeling of dread and loneliness. Did you ever find yourself just humming a tune from a game while you're working, or replaying a level just to hear the music again? A Medieval had that effect on me. I even found myself jamming to the soundtrack on Spotify, which I've only ever done with the Half-Life 2 soundtrack. So do yourself a favor, even if this game isn't for you, at least check out the soundtrack, it kicks ass. Do you want tight, fast-paced, responsive combat? Do you want an arsenal of weapons that let you tackle any enemy horde the way you want? Well, a Medieval has you covered. Seriously, the combat is so snappy and well done in this game, it kind of makes me wonder why FPS games have strayed away from this kind of combat for more linear or cover-based gunplay. I mean, I understand that more realistic shooters like Call of Duty or Battlefield have to do this in order to achieve a certain level of realism or whatever, but after a while, the linear formula just starts to get a bit stale. I didn't realize this until I started playing a Medieval and was like, oh yeah, I have to keep moving to survive. I have to figure out which weapon I should use for this situation. It's like a demonic fencing match or an evil dance routine. The combat ebbs and flows beautifully in a way that only a retro FPS can truly pull off. Now, I'm not saying linear shooting is bad. I mean, Uncharted 2 is one of my favorite games, and the combat is as basic as it can get in that game. But games like Titanfall 2 and Doom Eternal managed to make their combat fast and exciting without using that same old formula of find some cover, pick off some enemies, and move on. Every game can't be Titanfall 2 and Doom Eternal, but it was just really nice and refreshing to see some different combat in a modern FPS. Like, these games really put a cool spin on the combat, and I just wish more games would try to think outside the box and go along these routes of, oh, maybe we can add some wall running. Not Advanced Warfare, or maybe we could, add some weird trapeze acts like you do in Doom Eternal when you're swinging on all those bars. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a dev, but like, I know what feels good and I know what feels boring. Okay, so a key part of the combat here is collecting the souls of the enemies you kill. You see that bar down there in the bottom left? When you collect enough souls and fill that up, you can activate this super mode that gives all of your weapons an alt fire. This makes you feel super powerful, and when you turn this on and start laying into a horde, oh, it's honestly a blast. Now let's talk about the weapons, because this is where a Medieval is different from most other FPS games. Like in Heretic and Hexen, you're not using guns and grenades. You're using axes, magic staffs, and this fucking thing. You don't use ammo in the traditional sense. You pick up mana, and the mana color corresponds to each weapon. You start every mission with the same weapon, the Black Axe. This is your standard melee weapon, it doesn't consume any mana. Next is the Staff of the Azure Orb. This is a high fire rate weapon that uses blue mana. Well, this one here is Whisper's Edge. It's a sword that fires long energy projectiles that strike multiple enemies at once. It uses green mana. After that we have Voltride. This is a trident that shoots lightning and uses blue mana. This one is called the Celestial Claw, and acts almost like a rocket launcher. It shoots these balls that explode and it uses orange mana. Up next, we have the Star of Torment. This is a green mana weapon and launches shards of crystals that stick enemies to walls. This one's pretty badass. Last but not least, we have the Eternum. Now, this is a purple mana weapon, and it's basically a Medieval's BFG. Just take a look at this. This game gives you everything you need to slay all the evil it can throw at you. It's so satisfying when you group up some enemies and blast them with a Celestial Claw. There are also boss fights in this game after you complete every realm. I won't spoil the later game ones because I think they're really fucking awesome, so I'll just show like the first boss you encounter, but I think they're really well done. One fight in particular was hands down one of the coolest boss fights I've ever played. Let's just say you fight these things called the Twin Terror, and it's a wild experience. Alright, now, as much as I love this game, there were a few things that pissed me off a little bit. For starters, I kind of hate platforming in games, and a Medieval has a good amount of it towards the end of the game. I've always hated platforming in shooters. I know it has to be there sometimes for pacing purposes or to break up some of the running and gunning, but I just never enjoy it. It's just one of those things I wish I didn't have to do in games. Now, I don't want to sit here and complain too much about enemy difficulty because I did play the game on hard mode, so it's partially my fault, but at a certain point in the game you encounter these spiky balls, and when they all start ganging up on you in these big groups, they absolutely shred your health in a matter of seconds. If you're not on your A game when you first encounter these things, you're gonna die. Now, obviously, these things don't make the game bad, but these are just a couple things I noticed while I was playing that either pissed me off or kind of took me out of it a little bit. I think one of the biggest things that made me fall in love with this game so much is that it took me back to a simpler time in gaming, back before battle passes, skin bundles, and pre-planned DLC. Developers seemed to care more about the product they were putting out and not just how much money they could make from microtransactions or how many people were watching the game on Twitch. A Medieval feels like a game that was crafted for the love of making games. It was crafted for the players, not half making a game and drip feeding the rest of the content for the next 2 years. Well, if you're looking for a fun, memorable FPS experience, I highly recommend a Medieval.